in Pretoria has ruled in favour of the DA to resume council in Tshwane, enforcing that previous judgment that set aside the provincial government's decision to dismantle the council. So this means a new mayor can now be elected this week. And the question is this the latest court ruling? Is it the latest victory for politicians, or is it a victory for residents? Let's try and unpack this story now. We're joined by political analyst Kagiso Pooe, who joins us now live. Good morning, Kagiso. So a victory there for the DA, certainly, with the council now having to go back to business, surely.
I would say it's a minor victory. Sorry, good morning. I would say it's a minor victory in the sense that there's still another court case which is coming, but it also raises more concerns about how I think the city of Tshwane found itself in this. If you go back to the previous ruling in April 29th by the Gauteng High Court, the three judges actually raised very substantial issues about how is it that this decision to actually bring in the executive council, basically taking over Tshwane, came about. They raised that there were really serious, I think, vague reasons given by the executive council of the Gauteng government as to why Tshwane was taken over. And this is not how I think citizens actually want things to go forward. It's important to remember that this is a minority government. There was no outright victory or winner in how the city of Tshwane was initially formed. So this really raises the question of if we cannot trust politicians and political parties to be adults in the room, but they always have to go to courts, where do we actually end up in this whole process?
Yeah, and I mean, that's my next question to you. It's the residents themselves that are the worst affected by this kind of political back and forth.
I'd answer that as a yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it gives a bit of uncertainty, especially if you look at what was supposed to be happening currently, namely the integrated development plan, which, if I'm not mistaken, for the city of Tshwane was supposed to finalize on, I think it's June the 19th. I think final inputs were supposed to be given then, but due to COVID and other reasons, it's been staggering along. But the good thing has been that there has been, as in water services and as such, have been running properly. So we get to see the good of having a separation sometimes between administrators and politicians, where the administrative side of basically your normal bread and butter issues are still happening in the city of Tshwane. Refuse is being picked up apart from certain places. But it does raise a question to say, when it comes to major decisions, such as what has been happening in COVID, it raises questions of when there is no political authority to really drive things home for citizens, where is our voice being heard? And I think that's more the bigger problem than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the worst time to have this kind of political wrangling in the midst of a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in decades. So the city hasn't had a mayor now since the saga around the former mayor, Stevens Mukhalapa. Who might be the next option there? Who do you reckon might be up for the job?
Well, I think this is where maybe the internal DA factions have to come in, because we also have to remember how the former mayor from the DA actually lost his seat. It was partly the influence of the ANC and the EFF, but it was also the issue that the DA itself has not been very clear in who it wants to bring forward. And by that I mean there's an issue within the DA itself to say the candidate has got to be brought forward. Remember that the DA currently has an interim leader. Is this someone who the interim leader supports, or is this someone who also has backings from the people challenging Mr. Steenhuisen? So it's not to say it's going to be a clear-cut case from the DA itself. And there's also the issue to say, does the DA have numbers? Because if I'm not mistaken, it can only take a few DA members, maybe rogue members, voting with either the ANC or the EFF to affect a different outcome. Because it's always important that the DA didn't win Tshwane outright. This was a coalition government. Now, the EFF might call it by a different name, but I think for the purpose of progress, we'll call it was a coalition government. So it'll be interesting to see who they actually bring forward and whether this coalition will go forward, because it's always a given. The EFF always makes a point to say we do not give our support blindly to anyone. If it so happens to save us, it'll be the DA, it could be the ANC. So it'll be interesting to see what the final outcome is. And while the judge did say that, look, the ANC and the EFF are obliged to just stay in council, I don't really think they'll actually abide by this. You might just see another walkout.
I find it very interesting that you have talked about, who might be better suited in terms of who's opposing John Steenhuisen, how the EFF comes into play, all kinds of political considerations, but you haven't said these might be the people who are best suited to do a really great job. I suppose that's not really how these things unfold.
I think the reason I don't want to put names forward is, well, at this given time and moment, we also have to remember that the elections for local government are next year. So it's an issue of saying, if you put this person's name down, and given the history, remember that if you read the previous ruling, it's not to say this is the first time this has happened. This internal fight within the city of Tshwane has happened. I think there's been 3 or 4 other fights which have led to the dissolving of council because they didn't meet in the quorum. So for me to give a name now could just mean that who knows what happens on Fridays, a new name could come up. So I think it's just better to stick with political parties. And I think it's also maybe good for citizens to also start thinking about it like this. The way our politics works is that we still use institutions as a guide for who's going to step in. And I think the bigger question we need to start asking as citizens is to say, if they're not responsible enough to give us, people who can really take their party's messages forward, especially when it comes to in local government, why should we give our trust to them?
Kagiso, I want you to just also comment on something that is unfolding in the Constitutional Court later today, the constitutionality of the Electoral Act, insofar as allowing private citizens to be elected as independent candidates in the legislature. This sort of takes us to the US, where it's more about your popularity and your budget than your ability to do the job. Am I reading this wrong?
I think you're reading it correctly, and it'll be interesting to see how the Constitutional Court interprets it. Because on one hand, people might say, listen, every individual in this republic who is a citizen lawfully has the right to be able to stand for office. But now the problem I always have with this, and I like that you cite the American case study, is that it actually now starts to bring in money more to the fore, because it says if you have the ability to raise funds and if you have the ability to be quote unquote popular within the South African parliament and politics, who's to say that you cannot rise to the highest seat of office without you having proved yourself? Now, some people might say, listen, TK, already politicians don't have to prove themselves. But I think this maybe just it fails to answer the bigger question to South Africa, that we're looking for so many options to remedy what really is a systemic failure of, firstly, individual leadership, and also I think maybe us as a collective, as a nation, that we haven't really got the leaders we want to see lead us forward. Because if I listen to your stories throughout the morning, you listen to what's happening with people at an individual level where there's murder of our females, if you listen to the fact that the economy is crashing, it all speaks to the fact that, listen, as a country, we're not really getting the type of leadership we need to actually take us and usher us maybe into this new era which many South Africans desire and hope to have.
So you reckon there might be a positive spin to this?
I'm reticent to say it will be positive. I think it's going to give us a different level of uncertainty. Because for me, my basic standpoint is to say, if society is not correct, if people by themselves don't have the necessary leadership capabilities by themselves, whether they come through a political party, whether they come from an individual, it actually misses the point. You're not fixing society. So I think it's just going to bring a different level of uncertainty in our politics.
Well, thanks very much for helping us understand these two big developing stories in the realm of politics this morning. That's Kagiso Pooe giving us some political analysis on the city of Tshwane going back to